The ranch sat on an endless expanse of ochre land, fringed by rugged hills that cast long shadows in the late afternoon light. Time had hardened every plank of the aging house, and every wrinkle in 78-year-old Henry Callahan's face. Decades of ranch work had weathered him, but none of it had bent his unyielding pride. He was alone out here, save for Banjo, his deep chestnut quarter horse with a white blaze streaked down his nose. Henry had raised Banjo from birth, and in return, the horse shadowed his every step like a guardian. The two had lived side by side for years on this isolated parcel of land. For Henry, it wasn't just home, it was a piece of the Old West, a place where the silence stretched so long and pure you could hear your own heartbeat. That silence was comforting most days. But on this cold January afternoon, it hung heavy and unforgiving. It happened when Henry was stacking hay bales in the barn. He'd felt it coming, a faint pressure in his chest that whispered of trouble. But like many old ranchers, he shrugged it off. When you've wrangled cattle in raging storms and rustled barbed wire with your bare hands, a little chest pain doesn't seem worth stopping for. But then the dull ache sharpened, rippling outward. His vision blurred, and the world tilted on its axis. By the time he realized it wasn't just indigestion, his legs buckled, and he crumpled onto the dusty barn floor. Banjo, tethered nearby, flicked his ears and turned his head. Horses have an uncanny ability to sense distress, and Banjo, who had shared nearly 2 decades with Henry, knew instinctively that something was wrong. The old man's breath came in shallow gasps, his gnarled hands clutching at his chest. Banjo gave a low snort, pawing the ground anxiously. There was no one for miles, no ranch hands, no neighbors to come running. The stern, self-reliant Henry had always refused help, depending on no one but his own grit. The ranch's lone landline sat inside the house, and cell service out here was as rare as a spring rain. Henry's chest burned like wildfire as he tried to crawl toward the barn door. The cold, packed dirt stung his palms. "Banjo," he rasped, barely audible over the hammering of his faltering heart. He tried again, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Go, get help." Banjo's amber eyes regarded him intently. Then, as though he understood the command, the quarter horse yanked his halter free from the post and trotted toward Henry. He nuzzled the old man's shoulder with his velvety muzzle, but Henry was limp now, his strength ebbing away. The horse whinnied sharply, stamping his hooves in frustration. Seconds passed long, agonizing seconds that Banjo seemed to weigh in his mind. A decision crystallized in the animal's ancient instincts. With a powerful leap, Banjo bolted from the barn, his hooves striking the frozen earth like the beat of a war drum. Henry had trained him for open-range riding. Now those lessons would save his life. The ranch's dirt road wound through miles of empty land before it reached the highway. But Banjo didn't follow the road. Instead, he took a more direct route, a perilous shortcut, across rocky gullies and icy creeks. The wind tore through Banjo's mane as he galloped under a dimming sky. For 18 relentless miles he raced on, unbridled and determined. At times his hooves slipped on patches of unforgiving frost, but the quarter horse pushed forward, driven by a purpose greater than hunger, fear, or exhaustion. At 5:47 p.m., Deputy Sheriff Clara Mitchell was pulling into the Sinclair gas station on Route 67. It was her first break in 8 hours, a quick stop to grab a cup of stale coffee before heading back out to patrol. She was about to step inside when something on the horizon caught her eye. A horse. It wasn't unusual to see riders out here, but this horse was alone, unsaddled, and moving erratically along the shoulder of the highway. Clara squinted, her hand instinctively brushing the holster on her belt. As the horse drew closer, she noticed its frantic pace, its wide, wild eyes. This wasn't just a stray. "Whoa, buddy," Clara murmured, stepping toward the animal as it rounded the corner into the gas station's lot. She held out her hands, palms open in a gesture of calm, but the horse kept whinnying and stomping, clearly trying to communicate. That's when she saw the rope still draped around its neck, snapped clean from a post. "Something's wrong," she said under her breath. The urgency rolling off the animal filled her chest like static electricity. Clara had learned to trust her Gutan based on this horse's state. Her gut was screaming. Grabbing her radio, she called for backup and a trailer. Banjo danced anxiously as Clara clipped on a lead rope and loaded him into her cruiser's horsebox. She didn't know where he'd come from, but his behavior pointed in one direction toward the ranches deep in the hills. Clara floored it, her flashing lights cutting through the encroaching darkness. By the time Clara's headlights swept across Henry Callahan's ranch, night had fallen. She spotted the dim glow of the barn and drew her pistol as she approached, unsure of what she'd find. Banjo stomped in the trailer, throwing his head at the barn door. "Stay here," Clara told him, though she doubted he'd listen. She shoved the door open cautiously, her flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. It landed on the crumpled figure of a man. "Henry Callahan," she breathed, rushing to